So I would like to welcome everybody to this general membership meeting of ACT-IAC. My name is Richard Spires, for those of you that might not know me. I'm actually currently the chair of IAC. My term started not long ago, actually July 1, and runs for a year. Renee Wynn, who's the ACT president, she's the CIO at NASA, sends her regrets. She's not able to join us today because of prior commitments. So we've got a loaded agenda, and that's why I'm going to get started. But before, oh, thank you. But before I make my remarks, I did want to thank you. You all got, when you signed in and the like, you met some of the staff, and I mean, I think sometimes we under-recognize the staff of ACT-IAC, and just tremendous people under Ken Allen's leadership. And I want to particularly call out April Davis, because April, and I don't know where she's at, but she's kind of the master here. She tells me what to do, right? And when to get up and say things. So, but she's really organized these events, these membership meetings, and does a wonderful job. So let me, if I could go to the next slide, please. We're growing as an organization. We're getting stronger as an organization, and that's just fantastic. And this just gives you a little sense that this year alone, we're adding already more than 20 new members. So we're up to, on the IAC side, these are member companies, up to over 425 member companies. And I think that's just a fantastic testament to the great work that we do as an organization. And it's all at all levels. Obviously I mentioned staff, but it's all of the member companies and all of you that volunteer and help the organization in any way, whether you be on the industry side or on the government side. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And if I could have the next slide, very impressive. This slide and the next slide, this list of companies, there are 38 new companies that have joined ACT-IAC, or IAC, I should say, 38 new companies since our last membership meeting in May. And if there are any of you in the room, and I think you have special tags, please stand and be recognized. I hope there's some. And I'd like to say, and this doesn't just go for the new member companies, but particularly is targeted, but really for all of us. ACT-IAC is one of these organizations. It's a wonderful organization. I actually got involved when I was in government on the ACT side. Now I'm on the IAC side. It's to me the one forum that I have found in federal government IT in particular that allows you to work together as true partners in a meaningful way and in the right way. And it meant a lot to me when I was in government, and it really helped me at times. So, but the point I want to make for new members is that it's kind of one of those things that you get out of it what you put into it, right? So I would urge you as new members, if you don't get involved, you'll sit here a year from now and go, well, I don't know if I should really re-up again and those kinds of things, because what have I really gotten out of it? If you look at all the activities, if you look at the communities of interest, you look at all the events, and you get involved. I mean, you don't have to lead them necessarily, but you get involved to help, all of a sudden you're going to find yourself in the middle of something that's very special. At least that's been my experience, and I hope a lot of you have had that same experience. So again, but welcome to all 38 new companies to the organization. If I could have the next slide. I think many of you know we have a very strong professional development program with a number of different classes at different levels. We have just kicked off the new Voyageurs Class for 2019. And thank you for those of you that have stepped up to be in the leadership role for Voyageurs. And then the next two slides, and again, I'm not going to try to read all these. By the way, all these slides will be available tomorrow on the website that you can, in the information portal, to be able to get these slides if you'd like to look at them. but both industry as well as government. If there's any that are here today from this new Voyageurs class or in the leadership for the Voyageurs, could you please stand? Okay. So I have to admit, I have not gone through any of these programs myself, but everything I've seen, I've actually attended many of their events. I've spoken to a number of them, and everything I've seen says they're wonderful programs, and I've become a true believer. And Mitzi someday is going to get me to actually lead one of these classes, right, Mitzi? She keeps saying that to me. Okay. Let me just spend a couple of minutes, and I will not bore you with this, but I think it's important. Last year, we embarked on doing a new strategic plan for ACT-IACT. It was a great effort, and we came out with that plan, and I'm not going to walk you through that plan. But what I am going to do is just very quickly talk to you about how we're trying to put that plan and turn it into reality, okay? So we have what we call the Executive Committee of IACT. That's an elected board of 10 key members and then some additional appointed members. And what we have done is we've really tried to align the priorities that came out of the strategic plan with a number of portfolios that we have created where we have executive committee members leading those portfolios, working closely with staff members. And I'm giving you this information, and again, you can get it on the website tomorrow, so that if you have interest in any of these areas, you know who to go to from a leadership role if you'd like to, if you have any issues, you'd like to discuss it. And it hopefully gives you a sense. So I just want to very quickly touch on them. If I could go back to the last slide. So Susan Becker, who will be speaking to you a little later about Imagination ELC 2018, is absolutely top priority this year. As you know, we're changing ELC a lot. We want to get it right, and we put a lot of emphasis on this, and I won't say anything else about it because Susan will go in more detail. We've also set up a portfolio around other conferences. We do a lot of other conferences and forums, and there was a feeling that sometimes we didn't know they weren't as coordinated as they should be with each other, making sure we're not stepping on each other's toes, those kinds of things. So we've actually got a portfolio looking at that. Enhancing government engagement is really critical. We've got great government engagement, literally thousands of government employees that are ACT members. However, it tends to be within certain agencies where we have little, I won't say none, but we have little penetration into some other agencies. So this is really an effort to drive, if you will, knowledge about the organization, get people involved from the government side. One of the things in our strategic plan was to start to look at more vertical markets, and we decided healthcare within the government was an area that we should really focus on. And so we reached out, and I asked the IACT EC to appoint Mr. Ken Bonner, not elected, but appointed. He's got tremendous background, both from being in government and government healthcare, his whole military career, to stepping out and now serving the community from the IACT side. And so we've created this portfolio about driving improvement in healthcare and what we can do as IACT to do that. Okay? Another big area, driving IACT membership. I mean, I mentioned we're growing again, and we're growing, by the way, in times when there's a lot of industry consolidation going on. So that's a really good thing. But one of the things that the market's changing rapidly, right? So new cloud-based companies, new SaaS offerings, the way in which the government's buying IT services in particular has changed a lot, and we need to change with it. So we've got a real emphasis on how do we change ourselves to be, not to lose the great companies we have, okay, but to appeal to other kinds of companies that are serving the government in the technology space. Enhancing collaboration activities is all about really working closely with our special projects, with our communities of interest, to make sure that we're doing that effectively and doing that well. I should say that one of our strategic initiatives is to support the President's management agenda. So we just had a meeting the other evening, getting debriefed by all the communities of interest about how it is that they're aligning their work with what this administration is trying to do as far as the President's management agenda. Very, very informative. Professional and leadership development, I mentioned the Voyageurs class that just kicked off. We got a lot of activities going there, and we do have a portfolio focused on how we can continue to improve and evolve what we do in professional and leadership development. And then finally, a few of us, led by Sundar, who is also the gentleman that handles the finances for the executive committee, are working on how do we improve metrics? How do we better measure what we're doing as an organization, obviously to then use those measures to improve. Okay, so we're going to really work on putting measures in place that are meaningful, that we can track, and that we can bring to the membership to show how we're doing and steps we are taking to improve. Okay, so I just wanted to very quickly go through what we're doing in that regard. Finally, my closing remarks here. We got a lot of upcoming events. You're going to see here, by the way, all of these are on the website. If you go to actiact.org, you can see all these, but I just want to point out a couple of things. We have a lot of the COIs have monthly meetings where they have speakers. If you have interest, like for instance in shared services, we've got one coming up here on the 27th of September. We've got a very special thing. Last year, under Mitzi's leadership, we stood up something called the Federal Insights Exchange to really help bring government executives out to better educate, okay, the IACT. And we have Dr. John Zangardi, who will be visiting us, if you will, on October 5th. Dr. Zangardi is the new CIO at the Department of Homeland Security, which was in the role that I was in. So I'm very interested in what his remarks will be and plan on attending that one myself. Obviously, the big one is Imagination ELC coming up in mid-October. You'll hear more about that a little bit later. But as you can see, we've got a number of other items. I would end that on November 28th, we'll have our next general membership meeting, just like this one. Okay? So now I'm going to, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Chuck Santangelo. And I know Chuck well. He and I worked very closely together when I was in government at DHS. And Chuck has been leading on the government side. He's now at OD&I. A very important special project that we kicked off, and he can tell you more about it, of course, but around identity, credential, and access management. So I'm going to turn it over to him. And then, and I won't stand up here again, but Susan Becker, who I mentioned earlier, okay? Susan is really the driving force for the planning for this year's ELC. And she's an executive at Unisys, so she's on the industry side. She does have others she's working with, like Darren Ash is her counterpart. But she's put so much of her time into this, and it's wonderful to see how this is coming together. She's going to brief us on what's going to be going on at ELC. But now, Chuck, nice to see you, sir. Good to see you.
Make sure I know how to do this. There we go. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you, Richard, for that nice introduction. And it's mutual. I've known Richard for probably about a decade. And when he was DHS CIO, and then obviously he's a CEO now, what a difference a letter makes, right? And I also call him a friend, so I'll end with that. So we began a journey about a year ago with my colleague Mike Howell from ACT-IACT to assess the status of what is the condition of ICAM in the United States governmental agencies currently. So we looked at federal, state, and local government agencies, and you can see a list here. We focused on a couple of key areas: the Drug Enforcement Administration, El Paso Intelligence Center. So you have the opioid issue there, and the Washington-Baltimore HIDA. We also talked about opioid things with the Delaware state government. We did local with the town of a small town in Louisiana. And then we also talked to AT&T FirstNet about their network, and that was illuminating as well. And then we talked to some others: NASA's ICAM office, OMB Max, NIST, of course, and then GSA FICAM office. So we did a nice survey at all levels and came up with some recommendations. Before we get to the recommendations, I'm going to give you a brief overview of ICAM, not to spend much time on this because you're all sophisticated techie people. But in short, ICAM is identity, and through identity proofing, subject establishes that they are who they claim to be. Credentials. Credential binds a identity to an authenticator, which is often a combination of username and password, and access, referring to what a user can see and do within a system. Just a couple of insights that we focused on. Identity proofing, smartphones for facial imaging or fingerprint capture is one of the things we looked at, and the good news is we're making progress. We're getting better at these sorts of things. Authentication, next generation beyond passwords includes cryptographic keys stored in secure hardware and trusted computer platforms. Identity federation, which relies on those partners' ICAM capabilities. Obviously, you don't always want to do your own ICAM. You might want to outsource it to a partner in different situations. And lastly, federal ICAM strategy, such as the GSA FICAM. I'm locked in a do loop. Wait a minute. Guess I'm not doing this right. I'll press a different button. There we go. Okay, technology strikes again. What